Sometimes the difference between making a deal and missing a deal is knowing one more thing to say. As a matter of fact, that's the difference a lot of the time. If you know what to say to a customer, you sell them. If you don't, your competition's going to get their chance. In 1989 or 1990, I was on the road selling workshops. I was visiting a big dealer in Northern California, trying to get him to send his people to an upcoming workshop and making absolutely no progress. I was just about to stand up and walk out of his office when I remembered something that I had just read in Tommy Hopkins' book, How to Master the Art of Selling. In a last-ditch attempt, I laid it out there and ended up closing this dealer that ended up being my biggest participant in that particular workshop. If I hadn't said that one thing, I wouldn't have made the deal and my biggest payday that month. At the time, that book probably cost me 20 bucks or so. Saying that one thing that I got out of that book that day probably made me about $2,500 in that one shot. I'd say that whatever I spent on that book was a pretty sound investment. How's that old saying go? The only investment you'll never lose money on is the one you make in yourself. So many times now when I'm doing a workshop or a kickoff meeting, I get bent out of shape when a well-meaning owner or GM introduces me and as a justification for salespeople and managers being there says something like, if you pick up just one thing that helps you sell one more car a month, isn't it worth being here? Well, if someone spends 8 hours with me in a day, I want their expectation to be that they'll pick up a lot more than just one thing. But on any given day, when you're talking to any given customer, it's going to be about having one more thing to say that's going to help you close that appointment or close that car deal. Most of what I know about selling, I learned. Somebody taught me. Unlike sports where, let's face it, if you're going to be at the top of any game, you need to be born with a certain level of ability. Selling can be taught and learned. Your income potential is governed by knowing what to say and what to do and then executing. Invest in yourself. What's the one thing you're going to learn today?